Welcome back to the Criminal Connection podcast, episode 5, Muscle. Chapter 4, Door Wars. Big Lou dropped this troublemaker with a pole driver with a right-hander. Boom! He was unconscious before he hit the deck, and he lay there flat on his back for the next 10 minutes with a silly grin on his face, like he was tucked up in bed in a 4-star hotel. That was the way Big Lou did things. 2 warnings and you're out. Knocked out. But don't get him wrong, I mean, Lou was no hulking brute who liked thumping people for the hell of it. In fact, he was probably the best club doorman Carlton ever knew. A proper gent of the old school, respected throughout the industry as hard, fair and effective. The night he was forced to poleaxe the half-pissed geezer outside the Dagenham night spot, he was provoked by a tirade of abuse and threats that have challenged the patience of a saint. In the end, he had no alternative. The bloke had come looking for trouble and he got it. Lou had seen dozens of similar characters take him on, and not one had ever succeeded. And no one got through the door when he said no. What was different about the 22-stone northerner was that he had no malice whatsoever in what he did. He was just old-fashioned muscle, smart suit and a dicky bow. Out to stop trouble, not start it. A true mark of his style was that after he smacked the lippy bloke at the club, he checked that he was not seriously hurt, then organised a cab to take him home. Knowing that when he woke up, he'd have a bit of a headache and he'd never forget as a souvenir of his meeting with a big fella. And a reminder not to be so stupid again. That was the way it was done when Carlton first got into the muscle business. A doorman had a sort of sinister charisma that carried a lot of respect. The drug explosion of the 80s changed all that. It became more difficult, dangerous and dirty. The security industry, from bouncers and doormen to celebrity bodyguards and gangland minders, grew into a massive business turning over hundreds of millions of pounds. Carlton reckons his firm of heavies was probably the best in the business, and at their peak, they were involved in security at many of the top clubs uptown. They were muscle for hire at a price, and they were fucking good at what they did. There had always been plenty of muscle around in the East End where Carlton was brought up, and yes, Carlton did admire gangs like the Crays and the Richardsons, and they had their hard men like Freddie Foreman and Mad Frankie Fraser, their own little armies from generals right down to foot soldiers, crude but effective fighting forces. One old-time villain once said to him, "You're only as strong as the people around you." Carlton founded his firm on that basis. Total loyalty expected all of the time. Doesn't matter who you are, you need that protection around you if you were to succeed in the jungle that the security business had become. Carlton pulled together a team from all different parts of London, all nationalities. Previously, the north, south, east and west had ruled their own patch, provided their own heavies. The territories were jealously protected. A big night was covering a door where 200 or 300 people turned up for a Saturday night disco. Then in the 80s, the rave scene swept Britain with tens of thousands of people turning up at illicit venues and dancing all night to acid house music. These so-called summers of love brought with them the new phenomenon of ecstasy pills and vast profits for dealers and drug smugglers. Yes, Carlton had his snout in a drugs trough as well, but it had seemed so innocent to start with. Carlton never imagined all the grief that was to follow, with so many deaths of young kids and so much vicious gang warfare. They began to find that muscle wasn't being hired for the benefit of the youngsters, but to protect the millions of pounds the organisers were raking in. It started to get very sour. Celebrity bodyguards had become all the rage. Muscle was in demand for people like Madonna on her famous gigs in Hyde Park, for film and pop idols who feared for their safety. Show business had been shaken by the murder of John Lennon in a New York street. Who could blame the stars for wanting a heavy in tow to look after their best interests? The problem was highlighted again and again with attacks on George Harrison in his home and the murder of Jill Dando on her doorstep, for no other reason that they happened to be famous. Muscle became a necessity, not a luxury. People were becoming scared with just cause. When was the next publicity-seeking nutter going to make a name for himself? When was some evil stalker going to fucking drive someone mad with worry? People like him and firms like his provided a sort of balance of power. straddling a line somewhere between gangland and show business. A bit like the Crane mob in its heydays, I suppose. I mean, they took on the jobs the coppers didn't want to know about. People were getting rich out of the drugs boom, turf wars were breaking out, and people like him were being asked to do the dirty work. Knife-ins, beatings, even murders were happening around Clubland, and the government and the police were getting worried. That deadly concoction of power and money was seeing certain people running out of control, and when it's time for a severe shake-up of the security industry. So in came compulsory registration and training in the early 90s. His certificate shows that Carlton passed his City of Westminster door supervisor training course in March 1995 at the Ilford Health and Fitness Centre. Carlton became registered security operator 000-115. Without that licence, Carlton may never work again. It was in many ways the beginning of the end for the muscle game as Carlton knew it. It gave councils who licensed clubs and the police who monitor them the opportunity to boot out people that they regarded as undesirables. Thugs and gangsters, in other words. It was clean-up time in Clubland. Unfortunately, the new restrictions often left a bunch of complete amateurs doing the doors and internal security. Carlton knew of clubs being covered by security staff who by day were painters and decorators, electricians, van drivers, whatever, and club doormen by night. I mean, good luck to them, but Carlton thought at the time it was very dangerous. Okay, they go down the gym and get a badge to say that they are trained security men, but what they lack is street knowledge. They need to know a face if he turns up. They need to know who the dealers are. They need to know the pimps and the prostitutes. You need to have done your own work, like a cabbie needs his knowledge to survive. It was for that reason his firm employed doormen from all over London, black and white. Wherever a job came up, Carlton could call on someone who got his ear to the ground, knew the local scene, who were the possible troublemakers, what was going on between different people, would there be needle if certain people were in the club together. I mean, that's what the bosses were paying the money for. People like Big Lou. That's not what they're getting a lot of the time now. A lot of the new security blokes are working for peanuts. And you know what they say? If you pay peanuts, you get monkeys. A lot are just topping up another wage, moonlighting, looking for a bit of glamour among the bright lights. In their heyday, him and all of his firm were full-time professionals. They commanded great money. I mean, Carlton was taking home £50 a night nearly 20 years ago. If Carlton did 4 nights on the door, it was 200 quid in the bin, which was bloody good money at the time. The better you were, the bigger your reputation, the more you could get paid. Good doormen were becoming mini celebrities in their own right. Now a few big firms have got hold of the security market, employing hundreds of part-timers for about £30 a time. It's all very well, but if the job is a big rock concert or something with 20,000 people and things kick off, you've got to know what you're doing. You pick up a sixth sense about dangerous situations. You've got to know how to control, how to talk to people without inflaming the situation. The top boys have got it naturally, the amateurs very rarely. If it's a bodyguard you need, Carlton's your man. He's done a lot of mining jobs over the years and they've all been successful. Well, everyone's still alive and no one's been robbed, so Carlton reckons he can call that a success. He likes to combine a bit of research, a bit of experience and a lot of intuition with a spot of animal cunning. It's his nature to be a bit jumpy, always on edge, looking for possible bother. But that's better than being complacent and waiting for trouble to find him. When Carlton stood in clubs with his mate Nigel Benn, you get a sense of people wanting to come up and shake his hand. They want to be seen with a celebrity, get a little bit of reflected glory. Then you might see someone who just doesn't look right. You get a bit suspicious right away. He looks a bit weird, he's moving forward, his hand's going into his pocket. To him there's no argument. Move in, grab him, get him up against the wall, let's have his hand out of his pocket to see what he's got. It could be a blade. On the other hand, he might have just been scratching his bollocks. It doesn't matter to him. Carlton's in the protection business and he can't take chances or waste vital seconds. If the bloke turns out to be a normal clubber, just out having a good night, that's too bad. A split second's delay and your celebrity could be lying on the floor with a knife in his guts. Carlton said to Nigel over and over again not to let people get too close. But Nigel's a great bloke who's more than happy to glad hand someone if they want to meet him. You can't cover everyone all the time. The weirdos out there looking for notoriety by attacking someone famous are a chilling fact of life today. Some of the lumps Carlton's seen doing security work these days don't seem to know their fucking arse from a bank holiday. The key is always on the door. That's where you stop the trouble. Control the door properly, you run a safe club. It's no good trying to root out every fucking tin pot drug dealer going in for the night. Make no mistake, drugs and clubbing go hand in glove. Who is Carlton to say whether someone should or should not snort a line of Charlie off the toilet seat or pop a couple of ecstasy tablets? They're going to do it anyway. But where you've got drug dealers, you've got drug wars. Carlton's seen some vicious infighting between rival dealers, and that's why you need experienced boys on your firm who know who's who, know when the opposition move in, know when someone's likely to pull out a blade or a shooter. That's why his outfit was built up from switched on guys from all over London. Carlton always had every corner covered. If they got a black problem at a club for whatever reason, they put a black team of doormen on to make sure they didn't get accused of being racist and people shouting, you've only knocked them back because they're black, and that sort of thing. If they got a white problem, they put a white team in to sort it out. Carlton thought they were the first multiracial, multicultural firm of heavies in London, and he was very happy with that. He's been brought up in the East End and went to school with black kids and never felt any animosity towards any black people, always worked with them great over the years. Carlton picked the hardest of the white guys and the hardest of the black guys, making them one of the most powerful firms in the muscle business. One of his West Indian doormen said once, "Carlton, you're way ahead of your time in race relations, mate. You should be in government." He wasn't exactly beating a path to Downing Street, but Carlton was proud of the respect that he was getting, and it was returned tenfold. At the same time, there were plenty of small firms out there with bad attitudes, along the lines of, they're the governors round here because they represented the best from both worlds. They became stronger. His firm at his peak was about 30-handed. That's a lot of mean muscle. And they were in demand. Come in and clean up their club. They've got problems. They pay good money. The calls came in one after another. They write on a case, they do the business, then they find themselves in a catch-22 situation. You cleaned up the shit, you cleaned up the trouble, and then they don't want you anymore. They get a little bit frightened of you and your little army. They're paying you over the odds because they know that you are good, but they don't want to say, sorry, I don't need you anymore because you're too expensive, and they no longer have a problem. So you'll find £30 a night doorman suddenly appearing, or haven't a clue, and you get called into the manager's office to be told, we've had the police in and they say they don't want gangsters on the door, so we're going to have to let you go. What can you do but move on? For every door that closes, another one opens. The drug bosses were themselves hiring muscle to protect their lucrative pickings in clubland. So much money was being made, especially from the dance drugs like E, speed and coke, that criminals were robbing each other all the time. Carlton didn't know until after Tony Tucker's death that he, Pat Tate and Craig Rolfe were supposed to be into robbing other drillings in a massive way. Drug barons were hiring muscle to protect their ever-growing empires. The rip-off firms reasoned that it was pointless taking the risk of illegal importation and distribution when they could just go along and take drugs and cash from other villains. After all, what crooks could go to the cops and say, "Excuse me, officer, but I've just been robbed of 100 grand's worth of drug money." So the big-time dealers were bringing in hired help. This was dangerous territory. You had to sit around in offices, rooms, warehouses, pub car parks, wherever a trade was going down. You take a look at the other people there. They're looking at you. No one says much. You think, what the f***'s going on here? Are they here for a trade, or is someone going to f***ing rip us off? You catch yourself expecting someone to pull out a gun and let fire. But a bit of fear is always healthy. It makes you a survivor. Without fear, you end up dead. But never, ever show it. Carlton has been in situations where he's been surrounded by 10 f***ing great minders looking after a deal, but he never let his guard down. Drop it once and you're finished. You're on the ropes. Carlton steers clear of the heavy stuff these days. Been there, done that, got the scars. Everyone in their game has taken a bit of a kick in the balls. The old style hard men are being put out to grass. The work isn't there anymore. Whether it's the police, the public, society in general, I don't know. But if you've got a bit of form these days, you don't get the good door jobs where the money is made. But get a situation where a problem crops up that the police don't want to get involved in, they'll soon let you back in to clean up a mess. And they'll turn a blind eye if a few people get bashed up. They don't want to be in there with loads of paperwork and court cases when they can do the job their way. Everybody wins. They get some work back, the club gets straightened out, and the cops get a mess on their doorstep cleaned up without having to lift a finger. That's the law of the street. There has to be a balance of power, and it's often people like him who control it. They had that kind of situation at Ministry of Sound nightclub in the Elephant and Castle in South London, which is run by Lord Palumbo's son, James. It was the in place to be seen. The rave scene moving up market, celebrities clamouring to be seen there, kids flocking from all over Britain to dance the night away. It was really taking off big time while they were running the Paradise Club in Islington. Then one of the ministry's security guys, whom Carlton knew as Northern Robbie, came to him and said, "Carl, I want you to get a top team up. They've got all sorts of fucking problems down here that need sorting." That's the way it was done. Word of mouth, reputation. This in muscle terms was the big one, and Carlton wanted it. Robbie hinted at dodgy doormen, money going missing, bullying the punters, all sorts. And Carlton was like, "Right, I'll take it on." He knew it was well within their capabilities. Basically, it was another clean-up job, and he had the boys to do it. They had a meeting with the Ministry of Sound bosses to get a briefing on what needed to be done. In short, root out the old security firm, except for a couple of doormen considered okay, and get the place hassle-free again. Carlton wasn't happy, though, with any of the old security firms staying. He could only see them as potential enemies. They would still have contact with the SAC staff, and that could prove dangerous. His fears were quickly confirmed when the ministry threw a first-year anniversary party at which clubbers would be dancing around the clock, a full 24-hour rave up. Carlton needed to rotate his boys so that they were adequately covered until the very end. He had doormen coming in, doing a shift, going home for a sleep, then coming back for another session. He was sitting in the security office when he clocked some familiar faces slipping in, the SAC door staff. Carlton thought, this isn't right. Something's going on. They had been given the nod by their ex-buddies. He had been told he must keep on. The old Pals Act. Carlton sensed something was going on that wasn't good for them, that somehow they were being set up. They didn't quite know how, but Carlton knew one fucking way to find out. He got only about 3 or 4 of his own boys on duty because the others were on breaks or having a meal. And see one of the former doormen sneak in, and he was talking to the old club manager. Something was definitely going to kick off. Carlton was certain. Because of his suspicions, he'd gone to work prepared for some aggro. He'd taken a bag of tools in a plastic holdall, a couple of knives, some koshes, baseball bats, anything useful. He grabbed a sheath knife and ran through the club with it in his hand. The ex-doorman saw him coming. Then Carlton clocked a couple of his top boys coming down behind him, who he thought had gone home. The other firm had by now got the manager surrounded in a back alley at the rear of the club. He was banging trouble and they weren't going to have any shit. This was their big challenge, and how they handled this would make or break their reputations for years to come. So him, Black Gary, Tony and 2 or 3 others stood there tooled up and ready for action. Carlton said, "Gary, this is fucking going to go off here, mate. What do you want to do?" And then at last, he was ready for action. Whoever came at them first, they'd choke them up. That was their code for knifing the bastards, cutting them up. Rearranging people's faces was an occupational hazard in their game, so they weren't going to be bothered by a bit of fucking spilt blood. They stood with their backs against the wall, so no one could get behind them and attack from the rear. Carlton shouted, "Come on then, who's first?" They were outnumbered, but Carlton knew his boys were capable of taking them on 2 or 3 to 1. They were the best in the business. Thanks for tuning in to our new series of content, Carlton Leach's book Muscle. Make sure you like, make sure you comment, and make sure you subscribe, and we will see you on the other side.